The Chinese Communist Party leader is pushing for more military deterrence. In a speech, he claimed China has the upper hand amid the current global situation. The world's biggest power players are debating how to deal with China. America's top diplomat is making his position clear. The Pentagon is calling for a new vision for U.S. defense. Its top official says the country should use technology to address threats from China. The Philippines' foreign minister seems to have had enough. He told China to get out in a Twitter post, complete with vulgar language. This as Chinese ships continuously show up in Filipino waters. And the sea level is rising along China's coast. A number of cities could be at risk, including financial hub Shanghai. New reports disclose the unusual reason why. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. As tensions between China and a number of other countries tighten, how does Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping view the current global situation? An article published in the CCP's theory magazine Qiu Shi on Saturday hinted at his perspective. The article focused on Xi Jinping's speech from this January at a seminar for province-level officials. During his remarks, Xi Jinping said the most important feature of the world is chaos. As for the sources of that chaos, he cited the pandemic, saying that because of it, people can clearly see how good the leadership of each country is and how superior each system is. He added that this is where China's confidence comes from. In an op-ed article in the Chinese language edition of the Epoch Times, China affairs analyst Ing-wen wrote a related statement. He said the Communist Party has been using all kinds of opportunities to disrupt the world order, an attempt to create suitable conditions for its own hegemony amid the chaos. Communist leader Xi Jinping has also noted that China now has the upper hand when it comes to global timing and momentum. He has also urged the country towards strengthening its military deterrence. He said we must not only dare to fight, but also be good at fighting and strengthen ourselves comprehensively, especially to enhance the strength of deterrence. Some scholars believe this idea is the key to China's plan. Xi Zhen, head of Hong Kong's Zhiming Research Institute, talked about the issue with U.S.-based outlet Radio Free Asia. He says the comment shows Xi Jinping wants to deter the U.S. both militarily and economically. Xu believes that Xi Jinping is aiming to expand both conventional weapons and nuclear power. He says in the near future, China will rise to second place globally in terms of conventional weapons, adding that it will gradually close the distance separating it from the U.S., which stands in first place. But he points out that there will likely be no nuclear arms race between the two countries. That's despite Beijing's efforts to strengthen its strategic weapons development. Top diplomats from the world's 7 biggest advanced economies are coming up with plans to deal with global challenges. And here is their take on an increasingly aggressive Chinese Communist Party. NTD's Juliet Song has the details.
Foreign ministers from the world's 7 power players, or G7, are discussing how to deal with various challenges. And at the top of their agenda is China. But America's top diplomat Antony Blinken clarifies that the purpose of the gathering isn't to contain China or hold it down.
What we are trying to do is to uphold the international rules-based order that our countries have invested so much in over so many decades, to the benefit, I would argue, not just of our own citizens, but of people around the world, including, by the way, China.
He says when China challenges that order,
we will stand up and defend the order.
Blinken's remarks come as Beijing is becoming bolder with its ambition to lead the world order. The Chinese regime has been rapidly expanding and upgrading its nuclear arsenal, and Chinese military crafts have been frequently buzzing Taiwan's air defense zone. U.S. intelligence reports also warn that Beijing is one of America's biggest threats right now. British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab says he sees the need to hold Beijing to the commitments they've made.
Whether it's in relation to Hong Kong under the joint declaration or wider commitments, whilst also at the same time finding constructive ways to work with China in a sensible and positive manner where that's possible. That's important, I think, on global issues like climate change. We want to see China stepping up to the plate and playing its full role.
Aside from China, the 7 countries also talked about economic recovery, human rights, and food security. The G7 includes the US, the UK, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. This year, the host UK has also invited other guests like Australia and India. The meeting is laying the groundwork for another meeting between G7 leaders next month, and President Biden is set to travel to the UK for the meeting in his very first overseas trip. Juliet Song, NTD News.
The U.S. Defense Secretary is calling for a new vision for American defense in his first major speech. Last Friday, Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin depicted a new vision in the face of emerging cyber and space threats from Beijing and the prospect of bigger conflicts. He calls on the current administration to use technological advances to address these threats. He specifically mentions quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and edge computing. That's a method that speeds up response time by processing and sharing data as they are collected. Facing China's accelerating military modernization, Austin warns that the U.S. cannot be satisfied with having the world's strongest armed forces. He adds, saying, not at a time when our potential adversaries are very deliberately working to blunt our edge. Four-star General David Berger from the U.S. Marine Corps also stated earlier that the U.S. military needs to upgrade its equipment to deal with Beijing's threat. According to U.S.-based media Breaking Defense, Berger delivered a memo to Austin back in February. And the memo reportedly lists Communist China as the top threat to the U.S. for the first time. A top Australian military commander has reportedly warned his country about threats from Communist China. Major General Adam Finley said in a classified briefing last April that Beijing has launched a series of gray area political warfare operations against Australia, and these operations are likely to evolve into armed conflicts. He was the Australian Special Forces commander at the time. Two major Australian newspapers, the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, reported on this briefing on Tuesday. The briefing reveals Australia's most senior military planner's view on Beijing's threats. Most of these views haven't been made public. According to the report, General Finley said that while Australia wants to prevent a war, the situation abroad is unpredictable, and there is a high likelihood of conflict. He pointed out that the threat comes mainly from China. He also emphasized that the Australian military needs to strengthen its presence in the Indo-Pacific region. He says that's because Beijing is seeking to take advantage of Australia's absence in the region. Chinese ships are continuously showing up in Philippine waters, and the Philippine foreign minister has had enough. In an apparent show of frustration, he tells China to get out with an expletive. In his tweet on Sunday, the minister also described China as an ugly oaf, forcing your attentions on a handsome guy who wants to be a friend, not to a father, a Chinese province. The Philippines' frustration stems in part from Beijing's aggressive territorial assertions in the Philippine waters. At one point, there were over 200 Chinese ships in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Most of them have since left, but then some still haven't. This despite a 2016 arbitration tribunal ruling saying these claims were inconsistent with international law. The Philippine minister's tweet also stems from Beijing's recent interference in the Philippines' maritime drills. The drills took place in areas in the South China Sea that Beijing self-proclaims. Chinese vessels followed, blocked, and issued radio challenges on Philippine crew during the exercises. Both the Chinese Foreign Ministry and the Filipino president responded to the tweet. The Chinese Foreign Ministry called on the Philippine Foreign Minister to comply with basic etiquette. Meanwhile, the Filipino president said just because we have a conflict with China does not mean to say that we have to be rude and disrespectful. He claimed that we have many things to thank China for, the help in the past and its assistance now. On Tuesday, the Philippine foreign minister apologized for his tweet. The Filipino president has been known for nurturing friendly ties with Beijing. The Chinese regime previously donated some 1 million vaccine doses to his country. On Monday, the Filipino president got his first dose of the Chinese-made Sinopharm vaccine. Beijing claims that China's number of citizens is on the rise, but multiple sources are saying otherwise. Last Thursday, China's National Bureau of Statistics published a one-sentence report. The country's population is rising, but Chinese authorities are delaying the release of the 2020 census results for the second time. The population census was completed in December last year. Plus, China's central bank is signaling a full lift on birth control restrictions. 2 weeks ago, the bank published a paper suggesting that Chinese citizens should be encouraged to have children. Experts also say China's population is falling. U.S.-based demographer Yi Fuxian estimated that the country's population in 2020 at about 1.3 billion. That's below the officially announced 1.4 billion in 2019. The drop is blamed in part on Chinese couples becoming more reluctant to have children. That's based on data from China's Ministry of Public Security. It says the number of newborns in the country dropped 15% last year from the year before. U.S.-based China Affairs analyst Yi Yangming told the Epoch Times that the bigger reason may be tied to pandemic-related deaths. Chinese authorities said cell phone users serviced by the country's top 3 telecom operators dropped by over 20 million in the first 2 months of 2020. That's when the pandemic hit its peak in Wuhan. Falling population numbers will have huge impact on China's economy. British newspaper Financial Times reported that the decline would affect the Chinese people's purchasing power and China's pension system. Reuters reported that the trend will reduce China's labor force and further reduce its fertility rate. That's because the working class will be made to care for the elderly instead. The sea level is rising along China's coast. Official reports suggest it may lead to more natural disasters. Chinese authorities report that sea levels along the country's entire coastline are higher than normal. China's Ministry of Natural Resources blamed the change on the land sinking. In 2017, a geological survey showed higher sea levels tend to result in more floods, typhoons, and land loss. They also lead to salty soil, which can cause wetland ecosystems to deteriorate. In 2019, Chinese authorities reported that land areas in over 100 cities were sinking, twice as many as the figures from a few years ago. Major cities affected include Shanghai and Guangzhou. Shanghai is a megacity located at the mouth of China's longest river, the Yangtze River. Because of that, the ground is softer there. The sea level will reach its highest seasonal levels from August to October. The weight of large buildings there, coupled with overuse of groundwater, both contribute to land sinkage. A decade ago, Time magazine reported that Shanghai's urban area had sunk more than 6 feet over the past 90 years. The dramatic shift also poses a threat to locals. U.S.-based research institute Climate Center says rising sea levels could put 93 million Chinese residents at risk by 2050. Last year, disasters like flooding and storm surge caused economic losses totaling $130 million. Zhejiang province was among those hit the hardest. In 2019, a typhoon there led to an economic loss of nearly $6 billion. The region will again enter its high tide period starting in August. Parts of Hong Kong will also be at risk later this year. Hong Kong authorities are planning to crack down on what they call fake news, but concerns are growing over media freedom there as Beijing tightens its grip on the global financial hub.
Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam said on Tuesday the government was working on a fake news law. The legislation will tackle misinformation, hatred and lies.
We have no timetable.
Speaking at the weekly press conference, Lam gave no timeline for the drafting process, but said the government was looking into other countries' approaches. But the announcement has been met with concern that this may be the latest turning of the screws, cracking down on media freedom in the global financial hub. This week, Hong Kong broadcaster RTHK announced reporter Nabella Kossa, known for her hard-hitting questions for Lam, would not have her contract renewed. The network also began removing some of its archives from its YouTube and social media channels, prompting online activists to quickly back up the content. Last month, RTHK journalist Bao Choi was found guilty on improperly accessing public records when investigating a mob attack on pro-democracy protesters in 2019. The case has fueled concern in Hong Kong, which has become increasingly authoritarian after a sweeping national security law imposed last year.
One of the world's most prestigious defense-related summits is giving the Taiwanese president its highest award. Organizers say this is because of her courage and her fortitude in defending her people against the Chinese Communist Party's aggression. NTD's Don Ma has more.
The organizer of one of the world's most prestigious defense-related summits has just given its flagship award to Taiwan's Tsai Ing-wen. The award is an honor on its own, but some aspects have made it particularly special. It comes against the backdrop of escalating political tensions between Taiwan and China. Allegedly, the Canadian government even threatened the organizer against giving the award to Tsai Ing-wen. The honor is titled the John McCain Prize for Leadership in Public Service. It will be presented to Tsai in person by the Halifax International Security Forum. The president of the Security Forum told the Canadian news outlet, The Globe and Mail, that the award is dedicated to her courage and her fortitude in defending her people against the Chinese Communist Party's aggression. He also recognized Taiwan as a country. He addressed Tsai Ing-wen as President Tsai. The Halifax International Security Forum is based in Washington, but was originally founded by the Canadian government. It's best known for its annual security summit in Halifax, Canada. The meeting brings together more than 300 delegates from over 70 countries. It's the only event of its kind in North America. The forum gets a significant amount of funding from Ottawa. A video also accompanied the award and was released on Monday.
First female president.
Tsai Ing-wen is now arguably the most powerful female politician in the Chinese-speaking world.
The majority of the people here want this island to remain independent from China, and they think she's the president to do it.
The decision to present Tsai with the award may not have come easily. That's because when the Canadian government got wind of the plan, officials allegedly threatened to pull funding from the forum. Ottawa hands over around $3 million per year to support it. The allegations were first reported by one of the Halifax Forum's media partners, U.S. media outlet Politico. But the Canadian government has since denied those allegations. This is not the first time the John McCain Award has been given out. The award honored the people of Hong Kong in 2019 amid the city's pro-democracy protests. It was given in recognition of their struggle to preserve their rights. Don Ma, NTD News.
Communist China bans or restricts foreign investors from taking stakes in its critical infrastructure or high-tech industries, but it is investing heavily in the UK's critical infrastructure. According to an investigation by the UK-based Times newspaper, Chinese and Hong Kong investors have quietly bought up UK assets worth about $190 billion from Britain's critical infrastructures, blue-chip companies to healthcare, schools, and technology. The investigation finds at least $60 billion of purchases or from Chinese state-owned entities, with huge investment going into the energy sector. Chinese state-owned China General Nuclear has more than 30% stake in Hinkley Point Nuclear Power Station in England. This company also plans to take a 20% stake at a French nuclear power station and intends to take a majority stake at a third UK nuclear power plant. China's sovereign wealth fund, China Investment Corporation, has almost half of the stake at leading energy company Neptune Energy. This state-controlled fund also has a 10% stake at the UK's biggest gas distribution company, Cadent Gas, and a 10% stake at London's Heathrow Airport. According to research firm Argus Vickers, Chinese and Hong Kong companies or private investors have shares that value nearly $80 billion in FTSE 100 companies, with nearly half of the bank HSBC owned by Chinese investors in shares worth about $60 billion. Some Chinese investors are also betting on science. For example, Chinese tech giant Tencent invests in gene sequencing company Oxford Nanopore, and an investment service company owned by a state-owned China construction bank invests in cancer specialist company Immunocore. Besides these state companies and funds, some private investors have also bought up UK infrastructure. Hong Kong tycoon Li Ka-shing has invested tens of billions in the UK over the last decade. To name a few, his family now owns UK Power Networks, Northumbrian Water, and train lease company Eversholt. He also bought up the UK's largest pub retailer and brewer Green King. Former UK Conservative Party leader Ian Duncan Smith tells The Times China poses the single greatest strategic threat to the UK and the free world. He says the investigation shows that the UK is dangerously sailing towards Chinese control of key aspects of its business. Former British Prime Minister David Cameron and ex-Chancellor George Osborne have tried to forge closer ties with Beijing in what they called the Golden Era. Research associate at Oxford University's China Central, George Magnus, says Cameron and Osborne were chronically naive. A new report shows that Chinese banks are linked to deforestation globally. Some say Chinese leader Xi Jinping's recent pledge to protect the environment is an empty promise. NTD's Patrick Hayden takes a look.
Chinese banks are being accused of funding deforestation around the world. A new study from Forest and Finance says Chinese banks provided $15 billion between 2016 and 2020 to industries involved in deforestation. That's in Asia, Brazil and Africa. China was second only to Brazil, but Brazil's funding mostly stayed within the country, unlike China's. So when Xi Jinping joined President Biden's climate change conference in April and pledged to strictly limit coal consumption in the next 5 years, it was understandably greeted with skepticism. US lawmakers also point out that China is funding fossil fuel initiatives globally. The head of Forest and Finance, Tom Picken, says the world's big economies talk big on climate change, yet continue to turn a blind eye to their own banks funding tropical deforestation. He also said even if banks are found to be knowingly funding illegal deforestation overseas, there are few ramifications. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow. Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.